Behold, the smoked chicken, the bird that might just change your life. Well, or if that's asking too much, it'll certainly change your day. This may not be fast or even easy or particularly, well, it is definitely healthy and it is incredibly delicious. And as for whether or not we can call it cheap, well, it depends on how you look at it. If you don't account for the cost of the cooking apparatus, this is extremely economical. For the cost of a single chicken, we're going to get a few servings of meat and about 3 quarts of the best tasting broth I have ever had that you can't buy at the store, and something that I myself have never ever seen commercially available. So as much of a bargain as that really is, it doesn't come close to covering the cost of the grill that we used to cook it. So behold, the Acorn Kamado grill, similar in function to the better known green egg, but less than half the cost. At the time of this filming, these can be had for less than $400. I generally like to think of cooking tools as easily paying for themselves, but I can't rightly say that a Kamado grill is something that can quickly pay for itself. So the bottom line is that you might want to buy the grill just for the pure purpose of making amazing food, but unlike most kitchen gadgets, it's going to be a while before it pays for itself. And I suppose that depends on how many restaurant meals this can displace and what kind of restaurants you patronize. So maybe in time, but the point of today's project is to make something delicious and healthy. I don't think we can say it's easy or cheap. Of course, it's all a matter of perspective. To start with, let's unwrap the bird. I like doing this in the carafe or the crock or whatever you call it because it kind of contains the drips. Speaking of drips, I'm always really careful about not letting this drip on anything. I'm going to go put it in the sink where I'm going to rinse it out before it goes in the trash because stinky chicken is stinky. Go ahead and pull out the giblet bag. Find the neck. You can tell it's a neck because it looks exactly like a neck. And that neck is just going to go right back in the carafe or the crock or whatever you call it until we're ready to make the broth or the stock or the bone broth. Then I take the rest of the giblets and I'm going to put them in another container. Even if you don't like giblets, go ahead and keep these because they're going to be instrumental in building the flavor of our gravy. Now, if you don't like giblets and you really object to them, when we chop these up, you can chop them into large pieces that are easy to pick out. But don't throw these away. There are things you probably like them in, even if you don't like a big bite of liver. Again, I'm going to hold the plastic bag over this container as I take it to the sink to rinse off before I throw it away. Now, while the camera wasn't watching, I went ahead and washed my hands. Anytime you're handling raw poultry, wash your hands often because you have a lot of opportunities for cross-contamination. So better literally safe than sorry. Now let's cover it with brine. I mix my brine to about 1/4 cup of salt per liter or quart. Liters and quarts are pretty much the same thing, by the way. And I do sometimes like to taste my brine before I put it on the bird. Never ever taste your brine after it's been poured on raw chicken because once again, that's tantamount to just licking a raw chicken. We don't want to do that. But the salinity of this is fairly similar to what we're going to end up with on our bird. So, make sure you wash your hands before and after. And yeah, that's about the saltiness I want for my bird. And that's going to do it. So now I'm going to put all of this, my chicken, the brine, the neck, and my giblets, which I will cover, all back into the fridge. We're going to let that sit for 12 to 24 hours. So into the fridge they go. And now, thanks to the magic of video magic, it is the next day. And my chicken has been brining here for overnight and then some, along with the neck. And my giblets are still safely in this container. First thing we want to do is to bring about 3.5 inches of water to a boil. Yes, inches. The idea is that we want to have enough water to cover the giblets plus another couple of inches and then some. You'll see why in a moment. I do suggest covering your pot partly to save some energy, partly to get the water to boil faster, and partly to minimize the evaporation because we're going to keep this going for quite a while. And while that water is getting hot, let's go get our fire ready. Go ahead and get your grill started. I'll assume that if you have purchased an egg cooker, you know how to get a fire started. In fact, you might be better at it than I am. But remember that the hard part about this is actually keeping the temperature low enough. We really want to aim for between 225 and 275. So just go ahead and let this get started. And after we've got our charcoals all spread out and burning, we're going to add some smoking wood. In this case, I'm using hickory, but if you prefer apple wood or mesquite or what have you, just go with what you like. Let's go ahead and drain all of the brine off of the bird. Remember, there is a neck in here, so we want to make sure the neck doesn't fall out and that the bird doesn't fall out. I'm going to go ahead and drain all the water out of the bird as best I can. I'm going to put a very thin amount of oil in the bottom of the pan, and now I'm going to grab the bird and put it in the pan, backside down actually. And I'm going to leave the neck in the pot. But meanwhile, I am going to use these paper towels to dab all the water off of the skin, because wet skin will turn into soggy skin. And nobody wants a soggy skinned bird. Make sure to get under the armpits and all the little nooks and crannies. Anywhere that this is wet is going to be soggy skin. So let's get all the wet spots taken care of. Okay, now I can hear the water boiling. Let's get our giblets in there. Now that this is boiling, you're going to see why I wanted that extra water. I'm going to pour it into my gravy boat and or my thermos, whichever one works better for you. The reason I'm doing this is that I don't want the gravy to get cooled down when I put it away. Okay, so we've still got hopefully enough water left to put the giblets in there and have 2 inches of water above them. We're going to make sure to check on this every now and then to make sure the water doesn't evaporate. If we do have to add some water, let's heat it up to boiling before we add it so that we don't interrupt the cooking cycle. So we've got this on simmer. We're going to let it go for 45 minutes. And the neck is still in the carafe or the crock or whatever you call it, and it's going to stay there, and I'm just going to put this back in the fridge. Tying the legs is optional. As far as putting any kind of stuffing in the cavity, I'm not going to do that because, now this could just be me, but I don't want anything in there to block the smoke from getting in and out of the chicken. I've got that nice and tied up, and we are going to tuck the wings underneath. And this doesn't have to be perfectly straight, but I am going to get one last dab before I put that on the fire. Now, don't wait too long to do this, but go ahead and put the smoking stone, which is also the pizza stone, but today it's the smoking stone. Let's put that in there. Fits nice and neat. And let's go ahead and put the grill on too. If you have this tool, that's a little better. And we're just going to let that all heat up a little bit longer. And we're up to 200, so let's go ahead and put the chicken in there. Now, this is an okay time to get your temperature probe in there. Make sure to get that as deeply into the muscle as you can. You don't want it to touch bone. If it touches bone, you'll get a false high read. Whatever this tells us is going to be possibly inaccurate. So once we plug this into the thermometer, we're going to get it up to 165, and then we'll check it in some other places. But for now, close the lid and keep an eye on this, because as you can see, it's already gotten a little low. We want to keep that as close to between 225 and, well, really 300 as we can, but I have never been able to accurately keep it exactly where I want it. So don't beat yourself up if it's a little bit low. I've even had it go up above 350, 400, and the chicken still turns out lovely. So we want to aim for the 200s. It's okay if we're not perfect. This is a good time to check on the giblets. We want to make sure the water isn't evaporating. We've got a good simmer on there. And now it's just a waiting game. We're going to check the temperature of the chicken from time to time. We're going to check the water level on the giblets, make sure that the simmer is decent. I'm going to turn that up a little bit. And now we're just waiting. And while we're waiting for everything, this is a not bad time to kind of prep a few things. I've got 1 or 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. I've got another tablespoon or 2 of butter, and I've got about a half cup of wine plus about 1/3 cup of chicken broth mixed together. And then I have some herbs. Today I'm going to use some marjoram, rosemary, thyme, and oregano. I sometimes use sage. That's really whatever you feel like you want to do is fine. After I prepped those ingredients, I came out to check the temperature of the grill, and it's starting to creep up. It's getting above 250. So I got this down to about halfway, And I've got that down to about halfway, but I'm probably going to close those even more pretty soon. In fact, by the end of this process, these are going to be just barely open. And sure enough, I came out here to check on the temperature, and it's creeping up. It's getting up close to 300, which is fine. Don't panic. I've seen this go up to 400 and ended up with a delicious bird, so that's okay. But let's go ahead and turn this down. I'm going to shut this one down to where it's just a crack. And same thing with this one, just a crack. We want to keep that in the 200s if we can. If you own one of these, you know that that's really hard to do. So I'm just going to keep that just barely open. It's still going to be mighty hot, but let's do everything we can to keep it in the 200s. Let's go check on those giblets. And sure enough, that water is looking just a little bit low. Now I saw that coming, so I went ahead and put some water in my kettle to bring it up to boiling. And I'm going to pour that right in there. Now this is still going to cool down the water a little bit, but that's okay because it's still boiling temperature water. It shouldn't interrupt the cooking cycle. But I'm going to pour that in until we've got a fair amount above the giblets so that it doesn't evaporate while we're cooking. Replace the lid and let it go. Okay, so these have been going for at least 45 minutes, maybe a little bit more. Getting giblets just right can be a trick because if they're under, they're a safety hazard. If they're over, then they can get a little chalky. But I'm going to go ahead and pull off the lid. Save the liquid and remove the giblets to a cutting board. It seems like we didn't get that many this time. They do vary. Sometimes I get a chicken with a lot of giblets. Today I got a chicken with not that many. That's fine. Just go ahead and put them on the cutting board. We have plenty of time today because the chicken's taking a long time to cook. That's fine. We'll let these cool down. Make sure to keep the liquid. Now, even if you think you don't like giblets, that's fine. We need them to get the flavor into the gravy, so don't skip this step. If you simply cannot abide eating these, here's a hint. Chop them up into large pieces that are easier to pull out and fish out. If you really like giblets, then cut them into really small pieces so that you're guaranteed a little giblet in every bite. But resist the urge to make your gravy without them. Oh, by the way, if you're worried about cooking these to the right temperature, just use a temperature probe. And, just like the chicken, we want them to about 165. And then just set those aside until we're ready for them. And now we've reached 165 and actually gone up an extra degree. That's our magic temperature for poultry. We never, ever want to eat undercooked poultry because that can make you really sick or kind of dead. And even when our probe says it's up to 165, don't fully trust that. Have a secondary thermometer. Now try not to poke too many holes in your chicken because that'll leak moisture. But let's check a few other places. Why does everybody hate that word so much? 162, that could come up a little bit more. Let's check the armpit. That's almost always under 169. That's good. Let's check the drumstick. Once again, trying to never touch bone because you get a false high. That's good. Actually, 172. I think this is pretty good. So I'm going to unplug the probe. And I'm going to take this chicken inside and remove the chicken to a table with a good trivet. This one looks nice. It's going to continue cooking for some time internally while the moisture is going to get reabsorbed by the meat. Moisture. Speaking of moisture, why do people hate that word anyway? In this case, it's really important, and a bird that doesn't have it is going to be dry, tough, and bland. So this is for all you moisture haters out there. Moisture, 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 moisture. We want more moisture. In fact, we want as much moisture as we can get. The moister, the better. I'm doing everything I can to get the most moist moisture I can muster. So there. Now, while the bird is resting, I'm going to move it to a cutting board for that process. And if you have one with a little moat like this, that's the one to use. Let's pull out this probe. And I like to get that in some water right away so that it soaks so that we can clean it. And let's remove this to the cutting board and let it sit there for at least 15 minutes. Frankly, even after 15 minutes, it's going to be too hot to handle, so don't be in a hurry. But let's go get started with our pan gravy. Now, while the bird is resting, put the roasting pan on a medium-high to high heat burner to make the pan gravy. Now, is this the end-all, be-all mother of pan gravies? No. This is a quick, dirty, albeit delicious and versatile gravy that's relatively easy to make, but still light years better than the store-bought. I'm going to turn this up to about a medium-high, get this nice and warm, and you can see that it's sizzling, so that's good. Let's deglaze this with this wine and broth mixture we made. And I'm going to use a wooden spatula to get all the bits off. All the brown bits and things that stuck to the pan, that's called fond, and that is pure flavor, pure deliciousness. Now I'm going to use this to dissolve all of that fond into this liquid. And I'm going to grab about a third cup of this giblet cooking water also and combine that. And let's make sure that's all nice and deglazed. Which it looks to be. Once you're satisfied that all the fond has been deglazed off the pan, turn off your heat and remove it to another container. These gravy separators, I don't know. I don't think they're all they're cracked up to be. They never work perfectly for me, but let's pour all that deglazing liquid in there and give it a few minutes. Supposedly what's going to happen is all the fat will rise to the top and the other liquid will sink to the bottom. While this is happening, let's take the butter that we measured out before and put that in our pan. I'm going to kind of help that along, get it to melt. And we want that to foam out. If you're not familiar with that term, that means that all of the water that's in the butter is boiled off and we're left with just butter fat left in the pan. That's pretty good. Now we don't want this to really brown, but we want to take the flour, the 1 or 2 tablespoons of flour. None of this has to be exact, by the way. And we're going to slowly whisk that in. What we want to do here is we want to cook the cereal, the raw cereal flavor out of the flour, while also dissolving it into the butter so we don't end up with lumps. So this is kind of an arm twister. We do want to keep whisking. We don't want to like just let this sit. We need to keep whisking constantly while we get the flour all dissolved into the butter. Now, if this had worked right, all the fat would be at the top and we would be able to pour the liquid off. It never works properly for me, so I'm just going to go ahead and put all the flour into the butter. That's why I use the butter, because I want some fat to cook and dissolve the flour. Now I'm going to add the herbs. Like I said, I used thyme, oregano, marjoram, rosemary, and savory. But you can do whatever you like. Anything that goes with poultry. I sometimes like sage. And that's all nice and dissolved in there. It's going to cook somewhat evenly. I'm going to also add my giblets that are cut up to the size that we want. Get those kind of spread out in there. And now we're going to take our liquid and slowly incorporate that into the whole mess. Don't stop whisking. Just whisk, 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 whisk. The whole process. Now this is going to thicken as we whisk. And at some point, we do want to stop whisking just long enough to get a little salt and pepper in there. But for the most part, we're just going to wear our arms down, constantly whisking. We can take a quick second for some pepper. And whisk, 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 whisk. That's a little hot, so I'm turning down the heat just a bit, turning it down to medium. And now we've got another quick second for some salt. Don't oversalt this. You can always add more salt later. And I'll just go back to whisk, 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 whisk. Now remember, as this cools, it is going to thicken up a little bit. So cook and whisk this until it's just almost as thick as you would like it, because it's going to get a little thicker with time. So don't, if you cook this down to the thickness that you want, that will be too thick. Now I want to mention that as soon as this is done, I'm going to put it into that gravy boat in that thermos that I preheated with the water earlier. See how that works? We put that hot water in there before we got started so that the thermos won't cool down our gravy. We can take a quick second to get a spoon. If it sticks to the back, that's called nappe. That means it's a decent thickness, but I'm going to let it go a little bit more, and I'm going to taste that, see what I think. And what I think is that it's delicious. But adjust this recipe to your own preferences and your own liking, and make it better than I do. You probably will. Like I said, this is a quick, dirty pan gravy. This is not the be-all, end-all. Now what we do want is a silky, smooth consistency. We don't want lumps. We want herb mixture that we like. We want a thickness that we like. If we find that it's too thick, we can thin it out with a little bit more wine or chicken broth, or we can use the giblet water that we had. Other than that, we're just waiting for this to get thick, and then we are ready to go. And I am going to pronounce this ready. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to keep whisking while it cools down a little bit. And then I'm going to turn off the camera and pour this into my thermos, into my gravy boat, because I'm going to assume that you know how to pour something out of a pan and into another container. And frankly, if I do that while the camera's running, I'm just going to make a mess. Now we're ready to cut this chicken up. If you've already watched my video on roasting a whole chicken, it's exactly the same process. But just to quickly go over it, by the way, I like to use a boning knife and a carving knife. A carving knife is thinner than a chef's knife, so it goes through the meat a little bit better. Mine is not super sharp right now, but we'll be okay. So the first thing we want to do is get this twine cut off. And be really careful not to cut your fingers, just like always with a knife. It can be a trick to keep the skin on when you cut it here. That's usually my wife's favorite piece, but she doesn't like the skin, so it just makes it easier for me. I'm just gonna pull it off. And I'll eat that by itself. If you don't like the skin at all, just put it in your stock pot. By the way, this is our stock pot. Remember, it already has the neck in there. Now I'm just gonna start pulling off all the meat that I can. Now I'm going to pick this apart and get all the meat that I can off of it. That's what I call the rando meat. And other than that, I'm going to throw this carcass into my stock pot, and just like all my other bone broth recipes, I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to make a bone broth out of this carcass and the bones. It's going to be incredibly delicious because it's going to be a smoked broth. And bon appetit. Thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you next time. Ciao.